YouTube, thanks for tuning back into the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jason. We talk about Harleys, we talk about motorcycles, we talk about gear, we do rants, and we do rides. So if you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and click that subscribe button and let's get this video started. Some of you might know a few months ago, I got a Softail 2020 Lowrider S. But before that, I came from a 2016 Iron 883. I knew that I was thinking about trading up to a bigger bike. So in that process, I've been thinking about what kind of bike will be a good fit for me, a good fit for the next phase of my life, the things that I want to do. To make a long story short, I got a 2020 Lowrider S. But the other bike that I was thinking about was a 2021 Softail Street Bob. So in this video, I wanted to talk about my reasons for picking the Lowrider S versus the Street Bob. And we'll do a little compare and contrast, and we'll talk about who the Street Bob is for and who the Lowrider is for. Now, before I get into all that, you can't go wrong with either bike. They both have 114 engines. They're both great bikes. They're both comfortable. They both have the Softail frame. So there's a lot of similarities that they share, but there might be some few differences that sway you one way or the other. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's go ahead and start with some of the specs of the Lowrider S versus the Street Bob. The newer models of the Lowrider S and the Street Bob both come with the 114 M8 engine, which is great. It produces 119 foot-pounds of torque for both the Lowrider S and the Street Bob. Originally, I thought the Lowrider S was going to be much heavier, but when I checked online, I was kind of surprised. The wet weight of the Lowrider S comes in at 670 pounds versus the Street Bob, which comes in at 659 pounds. For some reason, I had the impression that when I test drove a Street Bob, it just felt much lighter. The tank size on the Lowrider S is 5 gallons versus a 3.5 gallon on the Street Bob. The length on the Lowrider S is slightly longer. It's coming in at 92.7 inches versus 91.3 on the Street Bob. The Lowrider S seat height is at 26.5 inches versus the Street Bob, which is at 25.8. So the Street Bob sits a slightly lower, a little bit more comfortable for you shorties out there. And you get a little bit more of a lean angle with the Street Bob at 28.5 versus 30 inches on the Lowrider S. All right, so now we've talked about the specs. Let's get into some of the features. On the Lowrider S, the gauges, you have traditional gauges mounted on the center console. On the Street Bob, you have a digital gauge, very sleek, that sits right on top of the handlebars. It's very easy to see, easy to read. I was a little skeptical about that digital gauge on the Street Bob, but it's actually very useful. On the passenger side for the Lowrider S, doesn't have a passenger pillion. On the Street Bob, it does come with the passenger pillion right away, already set up so that you can go 2-up riding. The Street Bob also has the passenger pegs, which is kind of a nice little bonus add. You have the BMX style bars on the Lowrider S versus the Street Bob, which has the mini apes. So the price, the Lowrider S base comes at $17,999, where the Street Bob comes in at $14,999, $3,000 worth of savings right there if you go with the Street Bob. ABS, unfortunately, is not included in the Street Bob. That's a $800 upcharge, whereas on the Lowrider S, it's already included. They both come with LED headlights though. On the Lowrider S, you have dual disc brakes, which is a very popular feature for the Lowrider S, whereas the Street Bob, you have the single disc brake. Suspension-wise, the Lowrider S has the inverted forks, whereas the Street Bob has the traditional style forks. I forgot to mention about the wheels. The Lowrider S comes with mag wheels, which looks nice in that bronze finish, and the Street Bob has spoke wheels. All right, so we just went over the specs and the features. Now I'll kind of get into my sort of decision-making process. What you have going for the Street Bob, it's slightly lighter. The skinnier wheels, it felt more nimble when I test rode it. It's less expensive, so you're saving $3,000 off the bat. I really do like the paint on the tank. I think it's kind of cool, it's different, it's flashy. So if you're into that kind of thing, that's definitely something for you. And I think there's a little bit more flexibility with the Street Bob to mod it out, just because it comes bare bones. It's a very blank canvas, as they say, with lots of opportunities to mod anything that you want. And for me, one of the biggest selling points for the Street Bob was that you have comfort right away with the mini apes. And you also get the passenger pillion if you want somebody to ride with you. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the way that the mini apes look, but I'll tell you, if you get the mini apes, you also get the extended wires. So if you wanted to get risers, or if you wanted to get, you know, T-bars, just higher bars in general, you don't have to change the wires, which is a big deal, because if you take it to the dealership, it generally costs about $600 to $1,000 based on where you're located. And 9 times out of 10, most people who get the Lowrider S tends to raise the bars. If you don't change the handlebars on the Street Bob, obviously you're saving much more. So the cons for the Street Bob, and there aren't really many. Again, you can't go wrong with either bike. I think both bikes are great, but for me, the design of the Street Bob wasn't quite to my liking. Also, the Street Bob doesn't come with ABS standard. It doesn't come with dual disc brakes. It doesn't come with inverted forks. Those are really cool features, you know, I've never had on the Iron. And lastly, I'll just say the paint can be a little bit flashy for some. For me, I'd rather just have like a little bit more of a blank canvas. That's why I went with black on the Lowrider S. I just wanted a very simple yet classy style of bike. So I'll give you some thoughts as to who the Street Bob could be better suited for. The Street Bob, you're saving $3,000 right out of the gate. The Street Bob could be also better for somebody who's maybe smaller in stature. Again, with the lower seat height and the Street Bob being slightly lighter than the Lowrider S, the Street Bob could be better for those that are slightly smaller, maybe more comfortable for you. With that, I would say the Street Bob is probably better in city or urban traffic. To me, it felt a lot easier to maneuver around. I would say, you know, if you're doing mostly city or suburban riding and like you're not doing these long trips, I would say the Street Bob could be a better choice than the Lowrider S. So that was my assessment of the Street Bob. All right, so let's talk about the Lowrider S and the pros and the cons. The Lowrider S is definitely more capable of distance riding or just some light touring, mainly because of that 5-gallon tank. I get about 200 miles about each tank, and that's with my Sportster, I was getting like 80 miles before my gas light was coming on. You get performance right out of the gate. Again, they both have the 114 engine, but the dual disc brakes and the inverted forks really makes the Lowrider S stand out in its own class. Also, the last pro for me was just the classic styling of the Lowrider S. You know, when I think about Harleys, when I think about classic motorcycles, that's kind of the shape that I'm more drawn to versus the Street Bob. I love sort of the clout around the Lowrider S. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I got the Lowrider S because the specs were all great and whatnot, but the Lowrider S has like an it factor, right? Like, it was only around for Dyna for a couple of years and then it went away, and like there's this rabid following around the Lowrider S. I feel like to have a Lowrider S is like a badge of pride for me. All right, so let's talk about some of the cons. Obviously, it cost $3,000 more than the Street Bob. To me, it was heavier. It definitely seemed a little bit more bulky. You know, my buddy owns I think 2019 Street Bob, and when we had them side by side, the Lowrider S definitely looks a lot larger, and I was kind of taken aback because I thought they were going to be very similar, and on paper they are, but when you get them side by side, the Lowrider S definitely has a little bit more of a larger presence. It is harder to find parts for the Lowrider S, and the availability of those parts, it is more difficult to stand out if that is your thing. The Lowrider S, who is it for? It's for those who are performance-minded. They want a really nice starter base that they can build on top of. It's a bike that can sort of do it all. You can sort of do a little bit of light touring if you add the bags and if you add a fairing. It's also for those who like to definitely push your bike a little bit harder. You have the inverted forks, you have the dual disc brakes, coupled with the 114 engine. It's great for anybody who really likes to ride hard. That's what she said. All right, so I just went over the specs, the pros and cons, and like who the Street Bob is for and versus who the Lowrider S is for. I got the Lowrider S because of what it can do for me right now, and also what it will be able to do for me in the future. It's just a great blank canvas, or if I want to do light touring down the road, I can set it up for that. With the Street Bob, you know, that 3.5 gallon tank was a deal breaker for me. It's finally nice to have a larger tank, and with that, I'm no longer having to hunt for gas every time I'm out, which puts my mind at ease. So in summary, I think the Street Bob could be great for somebody who just wants a very minimal bike, no fuss, wants to save a lot of cash. Maybe they don't care to do touring and they just want like an around town bike. I think that would be the perfect scenario around the city, but you still want to be able to rip once in a while. Whereas the Lowrider S, you know, if you really want the top-notch performance parts straight from the factory, if you really want to be able to get after it on, you know, the canyons, or if you want to be able to do light touring, I would say the Lowrider S is more suited for that purpose. For me, I wanted this next bike to be able to do anything that I throw at it, any sort of situation that I get myself into. I wanted a bike that was more than capable of handling all those kind of situations. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of this video. I hope this video was helpful. I hope it was informative if you're kind of in that decision phase like I was a few months ago. But I'm gonna skate out of here. Thanks for tuning into this video, and until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.